boxes here. So
yeah, no worries.
Hey, there's Ted. Hi, Ted. Okay, well, we're after 8:30 Pacific time, and I think I'll kick it off. So welcome, everybody. We're at our November interagency READ cohort call, and we have a really good meeting scheduled for you today. We have a panel of agency administrators and agency representatives to go through. And before we jump into that, I think, Lynn, you had an announcement you wanted to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to say for next month's READ cohort call, we will be having it. Sorry, I forgot to look up the date of it, but the third Wednesday of the month, and it's just going to be an open call for questions. We do this every December, just open for questions, open for support. It's just sort of a coffee READ cohort meeting. So if you have questions in ahead of time and you want to send it to any of the cohort managers, please do, or be prepared to just bring them up during the cohort, and we'll get group thoughts about it. And just if you want to support each other and say, great job, READs, and keep up the good work, and just mental health discussions too. So thanks, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays.
All right, thanks, Lynn. And one additional announcement I have is to definitely scroll through the READ cohort email that was emailed on Monday. There's a READ fellowship job announcement link in there that looks pretty interesting. If you are interested, or you could share it with others, there's an additional link in that email. So about to jump in here, and I want to remind folks, let's be super conscientious of our mute button today. So if you're not speaking, let's make sure our microphones are turned off for feedback. And I think we're about to get into this today. So, well, I'm Marisa Anderson. I'm an ecologist for the Forest Service. I'm based in the Intermountain region, and I'm out of Ogden, Utah. And we have our panelists here today. We have Jennifer Mata, Ted McARTHUR, Clay Jordan, and Tony Sandrini. And Clay was on earlier, but he let us know he was having tech issues, so he might weave in, or not Tony, sorry, it was Clay, might weave in and out because of Wi-Fi issues. So I'm going to first let our folks introduce themselves, and I'll probably today with all of our questions, we'll let you each answer one, but I'll probably change the order. So, if Jennifer doesn't want to go first every time. So I'll hand it off to you guys, and I will let Jennifer go this time. Could you introduce yourself with your current position, background, fire background, and your agency administrator or agency rep background?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Marisa. So good morning. My name is Jennifer Mata. I'm a field manager in Redding, California with BLM's Northern California District. I've been a line officer for a little over 13 years. My career prior to being a field manager, I spent most of my career with the BLM as a fire ecologist, both in Central California and in Southern Idaho. During that time, I was a line qualified resource advisor. I also spent about 9 years traveling with a Type 1 and Type 2 team, working mostly in communications, but also in the plans unit as a resource unit leader. And yeah, have been both a line qualified resource advisor, an agency rep, and an agency administrator. So I'm happy to join you guys today for the next hour or so, and looking forward to interacting with all of you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let's go to Tony next.
Good morning, everybody. I had a little computer issue first thing this morning, so I just want to make sure you can hear me and you can see. And yeah, maybe you don't want to see me, but camera's working. So, so Tony Sandrini. Good morning, everyone. I am currently a fire management officer for the National Park Service. I work in Southern California, and I serve the Mediterranean coast parks, which consist of the Santa Monica Mountains, Cabrillo National Monument down on Point Loma in San Diego, and then the Channel Islands National Park. So that's my current role. My previous roles, I worked out in the desert parks in California. I had Death Valley, Mojave, and Joshua Tree as the FMO out there. And then before that, I worked a little more than 20 years with the Forest Service, also in Southern California. I worked on a hand crew, a hotshot crew for 20 plus years there off the San Bernardino. And so a lot of operational experience, primarily operational experience until about 8 years ago when I moved into fire management. So worked on the ground levels and worked up through the ranks, if you will, and was really able to experience kind of the onset of the READ and REAF program, how it integrated into field operations out there, out in the woods. And so as I moved into fire management, now that I get to work in this capacity, I've been a huge proponent of the READ REAF program out in the desert parks, and then here on the coast, working with Cedar Drake for the National Park Service. And then I've been an agency representative. I've come up through the operational group. So, all the field going stuff, division, branch, operations stuff, IC things. But then more recently and more focused, really been spending a lot of time working as an agency representative with the AREPs that you're going to meet today, or the agency administrators that you're going to meet today, and spending a lot of time focused on kind of bridging that gap between the operational world and the agency administrator world. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, I think, when we get to be on incidents and working together. So that's where I find the value in this stuff. And I really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you folks today. I really enjoy this stuff. So thanks again.
Thanks, Tony. Go ahead, Ted.
All right, good morning. My name is Ted McARTHUR. I'm the Forest Supervisor of the bucolic Six Rivers National Forest. If you don't know where that is, it's up in the northwest corner of California next to the Oregon border and the coast. It's about 300 miles long, really narrow, and sees a lot of fire. I've been a line officer not quite as long as Jen. I've only got 11 years in, but have worked with Jen for many years, so it's good to see you here today. And prior to that, I have worked in a lot of different areas. I've worked in New Mexico and Oregon, and worked at the Forest Service National Office headquarters for a while as an ecologist, and in the Pacific Islands for a few years. Most of my career was, prior to becoming a line officer, was as a range management specialist early on, and then I switched over to an ecologist. And kind of the roles I played in fire, firefighter 2 early on, and then READ for many years, again, before coming over to line and working as an agency administrator. And I have traveled a bit as an agency administrator throughout California, throughout many of the Western states, in support of other fires. So I can share some of the experiences of being a traveling AA, kind of like being a traveling READ. There's a lot of similarities in how we show up and support other forests when you're off your home unit. But looking forward to the conversation today. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you, Ted. And Clay, that was really good timing. I'm glad you were able to find another workaround. So we're just right now going around doing intros. So if you could introduce yourself to the group, your name, current position, background with fire, and quick background as an agency administrator.
Yeah, I appreciate your patience, and I'm happy to join you all this morning. And I think I found I relocated to our fire dispatch that has generator and alternate connectivity and all that. So I think we're good for the next hour. So appreciate your patience. So I am the superintendent of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks out in California. I have, over the span of 38 years, I have worked in 6 traditional mountain parks and 3 national seashores, and a regional office in the Northwest, in the Northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic, in the Southeast, and now in California. And I came up through the protection ranks. So up through law enforcement, emergency services, SAR, EMS, all that. And within the realm of wildland fire, firefighter 2, squad boss, worked some in plans and public information, and then a good bit of experience on the all risk side of the house at the IC level, and various operations section chiefs for law enforcement, search and rescue, VIP visits, that sort of thing. And and then significantly in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, I served as the Deputy Incident Commander under Unified Command, working directly under Park Service Director John Jarvis at the time. As an agency administrator, I've worked with REACs in complex fires while working at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, including the tragic Chimney Tops 2 fire, or the Gatlinburg fires, and then some fires here at Sequoia Kings Canyon. So happy to be with you. And I think I'll turn it over to Tony. Is that where we're going next?
Actually, you were the last one to introduce, so
okay.
I'll probably jump into questions here in a minute. But yeah, thank you for all your quick intros there. And I should mention, we have a list of questions for our panel today. We likely won't be able to get through all of them, but I will save a few minutes at the end for questions. And also throughout, you can pop questions in the chat, but we'll probably save questions from the whole group to the very end. So I will probably start with our next question here for the panel. So what are your roles, responsibilities, and priorities as an agency rep or an agency administrator on a fire? So I'll let Tony go first.
All right. Well, I think I'll just start with a little caveat in that I know we've got a diverse group of AREP and agency administrators. And so I'm going to focus, while I am not an agency administrator, I've worked for many over the years, Clay, and most notably recently up on the coffee pot. But so I'm going to stick to essentially the agency rep roles and priorities, and kind of how I see them and how they interplay with the agency representative position. So really, I think the initial roles and responsibilities really focus on and around coordination with the incident management team, with the agency administrator, and then the REAF group, to really be able to focus on initially setting up really clear and reliable and consistent communication. Because I think that's the most critical piece to get things off on a good operational tempo and a good pace, is to understand that the communication element or component of these three functions, or four functions, if you will, really is a matter of ensuring that the expectations that we're setting for the communication cycle is clear and communicated with between the IMTs and the READs and the agency representative and the agency administrators. And so we don't miss an opportunity to communicate critical information in a timely manner by not having pre-identified and predetermined meeting times. So that's one of the most, I think one of the best lessons learned that I've found, and made that a priority, is when we initiate these agency administrator meetings with IMTs, that we set them up, we don't miss them. They have to be prioritized, because those are the opportunities that we have to really communicate the information that we need to get to the incident management team members and back to the agency administrator. And so we're not missing those things, because without that consistent communication transfer opportunity, there's really the odds are high that we're going to lose sight of certain things that we need to make sure we're paying attention to. There's just such a rapidly and evolving situation that we just can't afford to not have those things outlined and really be determined to make sure we're honoring those opportunities to transfer information. So I think that for me is the first like real priority that I would highlight. And then the roles and responsibilities is just to continue to keep those communication lines open constantly, like being available, being readily available to sit with the reads and the reefs in the tent or the trailer. Taking the opportunity to spend time with the agency administrator. And again, this is from an agency representative point of view, is bridging that gap and being available, spending time with an agency administrator when there's time to be had, and really just making sure that you're that conduit between the IMT and the agency administrator and the reads and the reefs. You're that connectivity. You're that piece that makes sure that everybody is seeing and hearing the same thing, and then identifying when we're not, and knowing and understanding what you need to do to bridge that gap again. So really, I think I'll leave that there because I could probably keep going, but I know we have some limited time, and there's a lot of value on the rest of the panel. So I'll stop there.
Hey, Tony. How about Ted?
Yeah, you bet. So a little bit different role as the agency administrator. You know, as I think about how to frame it here, you know, in my experience, usually I have multiple fires that I'm trying to manage at any one given time, and so as an agency administrator, I have a lot of different things pulling at my attention, and most of the fires that I work on are multi-jurisdictional. So I appreciated how Tony mentioned agency administrators as plural. And whether it's a single jurisdiction, you're likely to have more than one. And if it's multiple jurisdictions, you're going to have a handful of agency administrators that are kind of involved. And so you know, the things that are pulling at my attention, you know, the IMT essentially, if I'm the ordering point, you know, they came and they're working for me, and then I'm coordinating with my partners, whether they're tribal partners, whether it's BLM lands, other national forests, state lands, and then the READ group, which is also a group that kind of that reports up to the agency administrator chain outside of the IMT. And I know you all know that, but it's I think again how Tony framed it was really good. The communications can be challenging, and there's a lot of things that are pulling at an agency administrator's attention. And the way I usually have set it up is having an agency administrator representative that is there embedded kind of in camp, and then I will come and go, and I'll check in with the reads daily. But really, that primary relationship for that daily communication is with the agency administrator rep. And the other challenge, the other part of that is ensuring that the other jurisdictional responsibilities and interest on the fire have a voice in how we're approaching the management of the fire. And I think the role that you all play as reads is very important in how we're able to successfully manage all the things from the resource concerns, from the suppression actions, to the concerns around what the fire is going to do and where it's going. So, and I don't know that the only other thing I think I can add in there is if things are not going right, and we might get to this a little bit later, to make sure that those communications are being shared of concerns that you're seeing either to the AREP or to the agency administrator, to flag those early so that they don't develop into bigger problems as they go on. Because if you tend to leave them, they tend to grow into something much larger. So I think I'll leave it at that. Just that there's kind of a lot going on, and you're a very important part of that. and sometimes it's hard to get the agency administrator's attention, and you may have to try a little bit harder to make sure that you flag things so that they're tracking and aware, and can help perhaps alleviate some of the tensions or issues that are coming up.
Thank you, Ted. Clay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think those are great lead-ins, and from my perspective, of course, as agency administrator, it's ultimately our responsibility to make sure that whatever the incident is, if it's a fire, as we're typically talking about here, that it is being managed well, that we're meeting the objectives. And so some of those things that are kind of front and center in that are the safety concerns for the and risk for the community, for any of the home unit resources, cultural natural resources, and for the safety of the responders. And then that the tactics are being light on the land, and that we are making sure that the cure is not worse than the disease, you know, and which is with the READs. And so I see it as kind of an orchestration from where I sit, with kind of a key team of the incident commander, the AREP, and the lead READ, as being the folks that I check in most frequently. And kind of similar to what Ted was talking about, the amount of my direct engagement kind of depends on what else is going on in my universe beyond that particular fire. And as Ted kind of mentioned, what is the health of, how are things going? If things are running pretty smoothly, not a whole lot going on, then some check-ins is all I really need to do. Attend a couple of meetings here and there. But if there are things that aren't working well among the different partners, especially in a unified command, where you're not just dealing with one incident commander, you're dealing with multiple incident commanders. Of course, the external political influences, all those things can then really start to dominate time, depending on just how much pressure is associated with the fire. You know, is it a low risk fire off in the wilderness, not many values of risk, or is it really threatening things that people care about a lot, like homes or critical resources and that sort of thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. How about over to Jennifer?
Thanks. And I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. These three have covered it pretty well, but I guess I'll just summarize this question with kind of my philosophy, which is, you know, how do we navigate the incident that we're on to leave ourselves in the best possible situation locally when everybody else goes home, right? Because that really is our goal and responsibility. We know what our local unit plans say. We know the relationships with our local partners, and how are we setting ourselves up to get through whatever incident it is, that at the end of the day we have stayed in kind of compliance with our local unit plans and maintained our local unit relationships. And to me, that is success. So I think as you kind of, if things get stressful and busy and, things are coming at you 90 miles a minute, I think just always kind of taking a step back and really thinking about the fact that, the people who are there, who are local, know kind of best what, should happen, what needs to happen, as far as, I'm not talking about tactics, but as far as relationships and kind of how we want to walk away at the end of this, hopefully in a similar or better situation than we started. So I think that is kind of always my main goal as an agency administrator, is trying to figure out how we navigate the situation to leave ourselves in a good place when the incident is all said and done, and we're left kind of picking up the long-term pieces.
So moving on to our next question. So, on a fire, reads and reefs, if it's a large fire, we report to a lead read, and the lead read, reports to either each of the agency administrator, and sometimes the agency rep as a conduit kind of that go-between. But then also on smaller fires, if there's just one or two of you and you don't have a lead read, the REAF and read will be also still reporting to the AAs. So going into this next question, beyond that, just the reads reporting to them, how do you interact with reads and what are your expectations of them? Let's go with Jennifer.
Thanks. I like the randomness. It kind of keeps us on our toes. So, Tony kind of started off talking a little bit about communication and how kind of that is important. And so I think, really taking the time, whether that's communicating directly with the resource advisors because, it's not a very big organization, you don't have a lead read or even an AREP, to really kind of set those expectations early on. So really, kind of defining what you want their role to be. And I think that often may change depending on the individual incident, and kind of, establishing a routine of communicating with them so that you do have the ability to carve out some time each day to kind of close out with them and know what's going on, or the beginning of shift each morning. But really for me, it's usually, kind of making sure that they understand that, they're, what they are free to kind of make recommendations on, or what their decision space is versus what decision space has to continue to lie at the agency administrator level. I will say I currently operate in I don't know if it's a unique situation, definitely not if you're in California, but in an office where I have no direct suppression responsibilities. So all of the suppression on the land in our field office is done by CAL FIRE. So it always makes the interaction and the use of resource advisors maybe a little more complicated if you're on a state incident versus if you're on a federal incident. And so really working through and establishing those relationships early helps to be a little more successful. So I think I'll leave it at there and leave some room for the other three panelists.
Thank you. Let's go to Ted next.
I think Jen said it really well around understanding, kind of getting that leader's intent. What is our philosophy, our approach, our objectives on the incident, and how, as a read, can you support that? And I want to backtrack. I meant to start out with this. I want to say thank you. The read work can be challenging and stressful. And it is a commitment, and I want to just thank you all for either doing read work on your home unit or being traveling reads. It is an incredibly important aspect of how we manage fires. We couldn't be successful without y'all. So I just want to share that gratitude up front that this is an amazing group, and I really appreciate you and what you do and what you bring on fires. And so, on smaller fires, it's kind of nice because there's a little bit more of that interaction. And whether it's a smaller fire, a bigger fire, one thing that I expect out of reads is to develop a rapport with the divisions, depending on what size of fire and what the organization is, a rapport with your counterparts in the suppression side of things. So you can kind of talk through things, understand things, build that relationship. And again, support the mission because the objectives are the same that we're all trying to meet, and you're essentially our eyes and ears on the ground of what's going on. Are things going the way we should? Is the suppression side approaching things in a way that is in alignment with what we think is going on? And if not, help us understand that. And if there's mitigations that need to be happening that the team or organization is resistant to, help us walk through that, problem solve. Again, come with a solution-oriented, collaborative, really kind of mindset as you come in, and help us understand what are some of the options and opportunities that we can try to explore to address the concerns that are not being met. When things are going well, you're able to talk through things with your counterparts in the field, and things are just happening, and there's not a lot of conflict or discord. But often there's things that come up that we just can't resolve, and then you need to elevate that. But again, kind of being solution oriented, problem solving, which is tends to be the way you show up. And the other one, and I think, again, y'all know that, but especially when there's one or two, we all have our things that we love. We have our resource areas. We are passionate about something. But when you're coming as a READ, you're kind of helping to steward the whole and trying to keep an eye open for all the resource interests that may not have someone there to represent them and kind of talk through things. So it's a lot on your shoulders. And so that's why I wanted to kind of lead off with the thank you. It's just there's a lot that you provide, and the impacts and influence you have on how we manage the fire has implications, as Jen said. I mean, it's generational. The biggest impact we have is how we put the fire out, not necessarily the fire itself in a lot of cases. So just really appreciate how you help us navigate that and try to steer it the best way we can to help reduce the risk and manage the factors that we're trying to protect during an incident.
Thank you. How about Clay?
Yeah, all well said. I think the bottom line, right, is you are serving as our eyes and ears in the field and as a voice for the resource, for the cultural and natural resources. And so Jennifer and Ted have hit on communications already real strong, establishing those communication channels, how if you're working with me, what is the best way of communicating and just establishing those things. And I think there are a few other things I would emphasize. Number two, understand what is in the delegation of authority as to resources. What actions, as Jennifer said, require AA approval, any constraints, what resources, especially if you're traveling into the area and it's not your home unit and you're not an expert, a local expert, where can you go for answers? Establishing relationships with the home unit resource managers is hugely important. What is in WFDIS, since there's a lot of information that's preloaded in there. I'd say number three, and perhaps most importantly, is exercise diplomacy. You are working within a team. Exercise good discretion in that. Work through every situation. Don't just throw up obstacles. Suggest alternative solutions. Don't just say no, but help to get to yes. And assess the effectiveness and the risk of the actions and alternatives. And resolve any conflicts that are coming up at the lowest level. But just an effective READ or a REAF is a diplomatic one. Number four, I would say, is view the landscape in shades of gray, not in black and white. Consider the big picture. And when I say the big picture, I'm not just talking about protection and community and whatnot, but even from environmental impacts. If for example, if there's a proposal to put in a dozer line, and you're like, oh, I don't like that. That's going to leave a scar on the landscape, But consider what the ramifications are of the uncontrolled fire. What is the impacts to cultural resources, to natural resources, if that fire goes unchecked? And so really look at that big picture and consider all those variables that are in there. Number five, act safely. Don't go rogue. Division soups are responsible for everyone's safety, including yours. Make sure you're accessible. Number six and last one would be expedient. May be working against the clock, especially if it's a fire. Be proactive, anticipate requests so that you can get approval or implement alternatives quickly. Attend those planning meetings, especially if you're the lead READ, and be accessible. If you're out in the field, be accessible to the division bosses. Don't force them to lose time hunting you down, and you can't be perfect. We're applying the best available science at that moment in time. And so you may have to trust secondhand information or your gut. You may not be able to see what is being impacted. There may not be time to go out there. gauge your assessment based on how fast a movement and just with the best information you have available. And that's probably plenty there. So.
Thank you, Clay. I like your phrase. I wrote it down. Help to get to the yes. So thank you for that. Tony, I think you're the last one on this question.
Sure. Yeah, I think everything Clay just said. So his list of 6 those are great. I mean, all of those are spot on, obviously. But I think I'll be brief, but I think I'll just take it to a little different place. How do I, as an agency representative, coming from where I come from the operational world, how do I interact with READs, and then what are my expectations? I think the expectations, Jen and Ted and Clay, all 3 really hit on those like solidly. And I think how I interact with READs and REAFs as an agency representative is I think one of the most critical pieces for me to be successful when I go out as an agency rep. And I think bringing some operational, a depth of operational experience to that relationship, if you will. I think you come in and I interact with the READs with a great abundance of vulnerability. I want to be as open and as available as possible. And I think while I as I sit here today in, casual Wednesday and when we get to a fire, we look a little different, right? Like you got a uniform shirt on and there's stuff on your, collar, all kinds of different things happening, and you look different, and you talk a little different because you're speaking several different languages. You're talking about tactics. You're talking, and you're involved with the operations functions. And so I think understanding that as an agency rep, that READs and REAFs as an agent and agency administrators, we need to be able to speak the same language, but at the same time being open and vulnerable. So like I really want to be I want to break down any of those barriers with READs and REAFs where there may be a perception of knuckle dragging operations versus science-based firefighting and decision making. And I think the best way to do that is just to spend time together. So I think and I won't belabor the point, but I really think being vulnerable, being open, being available, and just expressing the fact that we're all here trying to do the best job we can. And nobody's set out that day to screw things up, right? So when things do get a little sporty, like Ted had mentioned, things are a little contentious possibly. It's not anyone's intent to be that or to do that. Everyone's trying to do the best job they can with the best information they have at the best, in the best manner they can. And so we just need to show each other a little grace and remember where we all come from a different place, and we're all bringing our own expertise to the table to make a successful outcome for what's, arguably a very, very challenging and difficult situation. So I'll just stop there.
Hey, Donnie. Okay. Next question I have for you all. What are some considerations for you when working with local versus non-local READs? I will start with Ted on that one.
All right. So this is a good one. And so whether we're talking READs or agency administrators, whenever you're traveling to a different unit, you're serving on behalf of the home units that you're going to support. And so my expectation, whether I'm the one going or I'm the one receiving, is getting a good understanding of what it is they're looking for. Because we all bring our own kind of learned experiences, life experiences, the way we do things. And that's good. And it's good to have that knowledge. And we don't need to force our values and expectations on wherever we're going. We need to understand what it is that they're looking for and how we can support that local mission. And so getting to understand what is needed, coming with an open mind, and trying to provide that best service that you can. For example, managing fires on the 6 rivers is hard. And one of the things that makes it hard, one, it's steep and deep, and you know the topography, but there's things like that in a lot of places. But one of the things that makes it hard is we have a very strong living cultural from our tribal communities that are tied to this landscape and have not been displaced. And so we integrate cultural resource specialists that are members of the local tribes for their Aboriginal territories, and they are embedded with the READ group. That just adds another layer of dynamic, and it's a different way of approaching things because we are very interested in ensuring that we're not impacting cultural values and cultural resources irreparably in how we're managing the fire, and that causes some delay, and sometimes it causes a lot of tension, and sometimes it works really well. We had this last year, we had both examples. We had one team come in and it was a well-oiled machine. They wanted to film the interactions between the division, the READ, and the cultural resource specialists because they could talk things through when there are issues. They're trying to problem solve and look at, this is what we're trying to, this is our concern. How can we mitigate this and still achieve our objectives with managing the fire? And it worked really well. The next team that came in, it was a lot of headbutting and consternation. So Clay, I really liked his 6 priorities and ways to show up, but how you show up and how you try to problem solve and be of service and diplomatic, like Tony was saying, that can make a difference and can help do a better job for everybody, better about the work that's going on. Really, I think the best thing is to try to understand what the situation is there and how you can use your skills and experience and background to best support what they're trying to accomplish. And part of that is ensuring that you understand what's the flavor, what are the objectives of the incident, how do we approach things? Because when you show up on a park or BLM lands that are being managed by fires being managed by CAL FIRE here in California or Forest Service, there's a little bit different flavor. So and it's okay. We have what we have to bring, and those skills can serve us well, especially if we're supportive of what that local mission is. If we come in and try to change it and impose our values there, either as an agency administrator or a READ, it's going to be hard for everybody. So I think there's some things that you can bring that can help make it a better and more successful experience for yourself and for those that you work with.
Hey, Ted. How about Clay?
Yeah, that is awesome. And there's not a whole lot I would add to that other than just a reminder, you know, if you're working on your own unit, you've got that home court advantage, you know the resources, you know how to represent and be a voice for them very effectively. If you're coming in, the key thing is as you're exercising all those things that Ted was talking about, when you don't have the knowledge, where can you get that information? And I think the relationships with the home unit, natural cultural resources, subject matter experts is really critical. They know the resource. And especially, if you are a plant ecologist and you're being a reef for the whole incident, you don't know the cultural landscape very well, perhaps. So where do you go for that subject matter expertise to kind of help you with that? It may be other READs that are on the fire. If it's a big incident, you work in a team. One person might be an archaeologist, another person may understand the wildlife biology better. So just going for where you can get that expertise. But I love the cultural, the stewardship issues that Ted was talking about. Encouraging if the AA or the IC hasn't thought about bringing in a tribal liaison, recommend that, and that will really help. I think get to the things that Ted was talking about.
Thank you. Tony, do you have anything to add?
Not a ton to add. I'll just say, just maybe reinforce that point about connecting, making the connection, and helping make the connection to the local experts, as Clay just mentioned, as you come in, and then understanding that that's what hopefully in those larger incidents. Again, I'm kind of focusing on that a little bit more than maybe I should, but thinking about those larger scale incidents where you can really utilize those agency representatives to help bridge that gap, make those connections. They're the ones that can really that have that ability to reach into the home unit where the forest or the park or the BLM field office, where you can find those experts, figure out who you need to talk to get what information, and that's where that you can really just bridge that. So yeah, I think well said by everybody.
And Jen?
I'll just add, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I mean, I know that's often a really hard thing to do, especially if you're coming into some place new. But like Tony said, leveraging those people who you are connected to on the incident or the home unit and just asking, especially if the agency administrator or the AREP isn't recognizing that you need it, right? Often, like, we hope that people come in and we would understand that we've asked for help from the outside. And so obviously it's not as plug and play as it would be if it was using our local people. And so we should be, in an ideal world, recognizing that we need to provide you maybe more support and assistance than we would our own local staff. But often, we're juggling so many things that maybe we don't catch that. And so, being willing to say, hey, I need some assistance. I need to know, not only who I should connect with on the hosting unit, but maybe who some of the partners are locally who might be able to help as well. So don't be afraid to ask. I don't think anybody expects you ever to come in, whether that says, an outside agency administrator or an outside resource advisor, and be able to just know everything and kind of hit the ground. So always ask for help. I'm the first one to always ask for help.
So, and looking at our time, I think I have one more question for the panel, and then I might go to the chat box to see some questions from the group. But this next one I think is a really good one. So let's see. Can you share one READ-related challenge and one READ-related success that you have had as an agency administrator or an agency representative? So I'm going to start with Clay on this one.
Okay, so I would say the worst example I can think of from a read, and fortunately it's been extremely rare, but had somebody was a very independent, self-confident, and he basically went rogue, and he was hard to locate. He was off exploring on his own, getting out off the fire lines, and sometimes even trying to drag division folks into dangerous situations. There was a lot of concerns about his safety. Where was he? He wasn't available when decisions needed to be made, and we sent him home. And it was just not a good fit. And we tried to counsel, and that wasn't working. And there's just not much patience for that in a fire. You got to work in that team environment, as we've all been talking about. And in success, there's a lot, but I'm going to go kind of back to the dozer examples that I use, especially if you're working in wilderness, or you're working in national parks and fish and wildlife refuges. A lot of times dozers is, synonymous with something evil, a dozer line. And but they are valuable tools. And I'd say one of the big successes that I saw once was a read really kind of negotiating. Okay, so a dozer line it's not a one size fits all. And especially with some dozer operators and division bosses, and particularly, with some of the more aggressive state organizations, if you have a big aggressive fire, they're going to want to go, 4 blades wide, and put in this super highway in there. but that really great negotiation process that I saw in this one case in Wilderness, where it's like, okay, well, what if how can we negotiate this? What if it's just 1.5 blades wide, but then there's a mastication zone on one side and maybe a retardant line on the other side to kind of expand out that area without putting blade to mineral soil. And it was just a great negotiation process. And it was well received and well respected by everybody.
Thank you, Clay. I'm going to go to Tony next.
Sure. I think for me, a whole host of things come to mind when I think of the successes and the challenges too. But I think as I look back, and I can remember, almost literally, I can remember the first time I ran into a reed or a reef on a fire. And I was just a hotshot captain on a fire on some dozer line on some hill somewhere. But I do remember the interaction. And I remember thinking to myself, very operationally minded. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what is this person telling me that I can't cut this tree? Like, what are we talking about here? I'm like, I'm putting the fire out. And so the challenge, and I've seen this evolve over the last 25 years. So while a challenge initially was integrating the reed and reef community into operations, we've seen it evolve into some successes where we've bridged that language barrier, that gap in understanding the operational priorities versus the needs of protecting the valuable cultural natural resources that we have, and specifically moving from the Forest Service to the Park Service. I saw some incredible changes in acceptance with how reeds and reefs are engaged in parks, and how we manage fire on the landscape in some of our units, and the differences. But I think the biggest success really has been closing that language barrier, helping reeds and reefs speak operational language, and helping operators speak reed and reef, and bringing them all into the same room together. And there's just a great level of respect for the resources that we've kind of changed the perspective of operators, and hopefully maybe change the perspective of our reeds and reefs to now we're looking at the same thing through almost the same lens. And I think that's just an amazing testimony to how we've been able to make these incremental successes over the last several decades that I've been doing this, to really see, like, hey, we recognize now that operationally we're not looking to destroy the landscape to put the fire out. Like Clay said, we're not looking for the cure to be worse than the disease. And I think from a reed and reef, from a resource protection standpoint, we understand that there's certain values that are going to be sacrificed. They're going to be impacted one way or the other, whether it's going to be negatively by the fire or it's going to be by the suppression efforts. So I think that's been the success, is just really closing that language gap. That language barrier is really diminished, and it makes it even more fun to be doing this kind of work. So that's just been a great success for us, I think.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, it is. Being fluent in multiple languages is critical, and it takes time to learn those and to get them down pat. So thank you for that. Can I go to Jen next on this one?
Well, I had a lot of personal failures, that's for sure. My very first resource advisor assignment on a very small wilderness fire, I showed up to briefing with a dead bird in my grill. That was a little awkward. Those things happen. I will say, I think for me, for success, I mean, we're a pretty small office, pretty small staff. And so I look back on some of the large incidents that we have participated in that have crossed multiple jurisdictions, and think about how we were able to build success by really working together as partners. And so I think, to me, that is a great demonstration of success. I think about the Carr fire initiated and started on Park Service with Park Service DPA, quickly came into BLM on CAL FIRE DPA, and then ultimately started to threaten Forest Service, both CAL FIRE, Forest Service DPA, and then also Forest Service DPA. So, but as a resource advisor group, we really worked as seamlessly as we could across agency jurisdictions. So we built a group early on, added with additional specialists as we needed to, as the fire kind of contracted and expanded. And then we're able to kind of transition out of the suppression world and into the kind of bear team, where the bear team also then looked across, 3 different jurisdictions to recommend bear team actions, as well as coordinated with the CAL FIRE work team. So, I think just noting that, those opportunities will come up, and you do have to really learn how to work together locally with your partners. Never as a BLM entity would we have enough people to really support an incident of that size. And so, we try to always remember to pay that back to our partners when they have incidents locally. So I think that's enough for me.
Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I think there's some great examples, and I think there's a common thread. And I think the one I'll kind of show in and try to keep it brief is one incident with kind of both sides of that coin, as the Boise fire this summer. And I think where we tend to have the most issues are when there's a dynamic situation on a fire that's rapidly evolving, and we're trying to address it, and that's where there's a lot of stress and a lot of tension, and maybe our best selves don't show up. And on this one, we had a contracting issue that could not be resolved with the place the ICP was located, and so we had to quickly move it. And again, if you've been in this part of the world, there's not a lot of flat places in the world in the area to move an ICP in a short window, and so we had a location set up that we were going to move the ICP and then kind of break it up so that we could fit it in different places. And it was Aikens Creek, which happens to be a village site and a burial site on the outside perimeters of a campground that's being decommissioned. And so it's a little bit of a sensitive issue. And the READs and cultural resource specialists were focused on the fire suppression activities, and there's a lot of work going on in the camp, and we had some rogue operations that were going on that came to really close to impacting the village side and some burial, some remains, and once it got flagged, it took longer than it should have to get things course corrected. So it was kind of an inability for the READ group, the agency administrator group, and the incident management team to kind of come together and get control of the situation, and almost had a irreparable impact on cultural resources. So that was intense, and we're still working through the rollout of that with the interest from our local community and the tribal communities that their ancestors that were being impacted, whose cultural values were being impacted, likely be impacted through this, and the lack of communication and responsiveness to those communications. And on the plus side, we're able to bring everybody together, including the READs, the archaeologists, hydrologists, and a variety of other folks, along with tribal representatives and the team. All right, we finally got this action stopped. How do we fix it? How do we do the best we can as far as the physical components of this to correct these actions and to do something to ensure they don't happen again, and then start building on that, on how to rebuild those personal relationships that were damaged through that. And that's kind of the thing is when you get these dynamics, the issues that come up are interpersonal. It's because we're not able to communicate with each other, and we cause big feelings in folks that are all trying to do the right thing, but trying to do it from a different perspective. I think Tony brought that up. And we got to figure out how to resolve that. When we we hit that heated moment, we get that impasse, we say things that maybe aren't our best selves in that moment. We got to make sure to take a breath, step back, and come back and figure out how we can work to repair that, because we're going to work together again. I can almost guarantee it. So we need to be able to understand that we're going to get into stressful situations. We're going to have conflict with our partners and our colleagues, and we need to figure out how to address that as soon as we can, so it doesn't fester, and we can have that professional relationship moving forward, even if we don't necessarily agree with what someone did or what their perspective is, but we know that we can work professionally with them and work through that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're at our hour here, and so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. There are a lot of good questions in the chat, so I'll first say thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences and prepping with all of these questions. And I thought we were really fortunate to have such a good breadth of agency representation here too. So, Tony and Claire from the Park Service, Ted from the Forest Service, Jen from the BLM. So getting those perspectives from those multiple agencies. And it's a pretty good segue. I was hoping to get a question from the chat. And so if you're able to stay on for one more question, would really appreciate it, but also understand if you need to drop off. The one I'd like to try to sneak in here is from Monique Sanchez. She asks, how are conflicts between AAs representing different agencies resolved? Often, lead reads are put in the middle of something that I feel should have been resolved prior. And I will let any of you start on that, who thinks can maybe answer that off the bat here.
I'll jump in if no one else. So conflict happens. And that's just the nature of it. There are incidents where, Jen shared it. A lot of my learning is from my own personal failures, and sometimes going into managing a large complex incident, it's hard to get the agency administrators on the same page, and it could be even the same agency but different management units have different objectives. And I could go into some lengthy stories there, because almost every fire I have, I share. And it's almost easier to share on the CAL FIRE side, because I know what to expect. And I understand their perspective. I understand kind of what their mission is. And so the onus is on the agency administrators to figure it out. And as a lead read or read reef and your engagement, there's things that you can nudge and you can influence, but there's only so much you can do, because you don't own that. The agency administrators own that relationship and are responsible for that. And sometimes they might need to be reminded that, hey, I am a little unclear here. I feel like I'm getting two different things. So come from curiosity. Don't try to poke the bear when they're already maybe agitated because they can't get their partner on board. But highlight the lack of clarity and the lack of understanding of what you need in order for you to be successful, because you can't get a clear vision from what the agency administrators are looking for, and that can help refocus on, hey, even the worst situations where I've almost I've lost my cool, but had some very challenging conversations, had been able to work it out and get to a place where, hey, you know what, we need to come up with something that our team can deliver. The ICs need it, and you all need it as the reads. And so again, that's what I would ask for, is help us refocus in, hey, I don't understand what I'm being asked to do. Can you help bridge this gap or clarify for me so that I'm not kind of bouncing between two different agencies and trying to do two different things, because I can't. We have one mission, one objective, even if there's multiple jurisdictions. As Clay mentioned, it's unified command. We've got to work to be unified, and sometimes it's a little easier than others. But anyway, those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you, Ted. And Clay, I saw you unmute at the beginning. Did you have anything to add on that one?
I think that's really good, and I think the key thing is, as Ted said, is that it is between the AAs to work through. At a certain point, you just need to return to your voice of the resource and say, this is, this is my assessment of the situation. Ultimately the AAs need to work that out with the IC. And in your negotiation process, trying to get to yes, you can say, hey, this is as far as I was able to comfortably get. It's up to you to make a decision, and then try to disengage from that final decision morass of while the agencies are trying to work it through. There are cultural differences. There are personality differences. Sometimes it goes smooth, sometimes not. And sometimes you're going to be caught in the middle of something, you don't want, where you don't want to be. But just eventually come back to the why are you there? You are there as an expert. You're giving an opinion. Now it's for the decision makers to, IC and agency administrators to make that final call.
Thank you. And Jen or Tony, anything to add to that?
I would say if you have an agency rep, you can use them. They might, if you don't feel comfortable going straight to the agency administrator, but you're having those issues as a READ or REAF, often we tend to utilize agency reps that as an agency administrator we're comfortable with and we have a lot of trust in. And so being able to go to them to then have them kind of relay maybe some of those more challenging feedback might be helpful. Sorry, Tony, if I stole your thunder.
No, all good. But that's essentially what I was going to say was that's really the what the AREP, or hopefully that's really what the AREP should be doing there. I mean, that's what I try to do when I serve in that capacity is really there's no other purpose than to get these, different conflicting priorities to align, right? And that's your role, is to be that conduit between these different functions. And so utilize that AREP for sure. That's what they're there for. They should be checking in. Hopefully you're spending a lot of time with them anyway, and so a lot of times these things get flushed out early on. But like you say, when they don't, when things get missed, and things will get missed, fall back to that agency rep if you have that, and hopefully that relationship's been forged early on and so you're not trying to do all that at once. But yeah, absolutely. Great points, everybody.
Hey, Marisa, can I do a go back? Because I think what would also span another question that some folks had expressed concerns with is about relationships with the agency administrator themselves, and if those communications is kind of dicey. I think the other person to keep in mind, I like Jennifer's answer about, maybe the AREP is somebody you can communicate better with than the AA, and then have them work it out. But the other person is seek out that local resource management, environmental compliance person on the home unit. They may be the AA whisperer. They have a relationship with it, and they are in your kinship. They have kinship to you, so they understand where you're coming from, and confide in them. Say, hey, I'm running into a wall. I'm not sure I understand the politics here, the landscape. Can you help me navigate this? And you have any recommendations as to how to best communicate with your boss, your day boss, that sort of thing. So that's the other tool I would tap into.
I also wrote down AA Whisper, so I'm getting all sorts of great nuggets today, and I really appreciate it. And so I know we're way over time. I wish we could have an entire half day or whole day with you all. This has been really beneficial, but also I know we probably need to get going here. So sorry we couldn't get to all the questions in the chat, and we didn't get to all of the prepped questions either, but it has still been really a valuable hour. And just, again, really appreciate everyone's, the panelists' time and sharing your experiences and advice with us, because the relationship with the AAs, AREPs, and with the READs are so crucial. And so this really helps everyone. At one point, we probably had over 250 attendees here, 250. So quite a few people were on here all over the country. So, and it's also being recorded. So those who weren't able to attend live can watch it later. So thank you again. And I think we got to sign off here, but hope you have a good rest of your day. And any other last words from the panels, you can shout out if you'd like to, but just thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate the invitation and look forward to seeing y'all in the Six Rivers. Look me up when you come out and help us.
Yeah,
Yep,
ditto.
absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Along.
Yeah.
Thanks all.